The NBA moves fast, and every season new stars show up, rookies take over the league, and suddenly the players everyone used to talk about just disappear. And sometimes it's weird because these guys weren't random bench players. Some of these guys were all-stars, franchise players, and putting up insane numbers every single night. But between injuries, the league changing, or just bad timing, some players go from being talked about all the time to barely even being remembered. So today we're going to be looking at some of the most forgotten NBA players of the 2010s era, and honestly, some of these names are going to bring back memories 100%. Kenneth Faried was one of the most entertaining players in the league for a few years. If you watched basketball in the early 2010s, you probably remember the nickname The Mammal, and that nickname fit him so perfectly. Faried played with such insane energy, and he was constantly just diving on the floor for rebounds, throwing the dunks down, and outworking players who were way bigger than him, especially guys with way bigger wingspans. Faried did not care whatsoever. He got drafted by the Denver Nuggets in 2011, and almost immediately people started noticing how hard he played. The effort was always there for Faried, it's just the motor was so crazy, there was times when he fell off. He wasn't always the tallest player like I mentioned, and he didn't have a polished offensive game, but there were nights where he would grab 15 or 16 rebounds, just pure effort. And when he peaked in Denver, he was averaging around 13 points and 9 rebounds. He was one of those players that fans loved just because of how hard he played every single possession. He also had a moment where his popularity really exploded when he played for Team USA in the 2014 FIBA World Cup, where he was one of the most energetic players on the roster. For a while, it kind of looked like Faried was going to be a long-term piece for the Nuggets, but the league started changing, and the NBA started shifting towards three-point shooting and just floor spacing, and more teams wanted power forwards who can kind of stretch the floor and shoot. Within a few years, a player who used to be starting and playing big minutes was suddenly struggling to find spots in the rotation, and eventually he was out of the league completely, which is crazy when you want to think about how popular he was at some point. Hassan Whiteside might have been one of the most random NBA rises in the entire history of it. Early in his career, things didn't work out. He bounced around different teams and even ended up playing overseas and in the G League. And honestly, it already looked like his NBA career was over. Then the Miami Heat gave him a chance, and everything changed for Hassan. Almost immediately, Hassan started putting up insane numbers. We're talking about games where he would have 12 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 blocks. He became one of the best shot blockers in the entire league, and in the 2015-16 season, Whiteside averaged 14 points, 11 rebounds, and almost 4 blocks a game. 4 blocks a game is ridiculous. Every night, he was just protecting the rim and making the opposing team's life miserable every single game. Because of that, Miami gave him a massive contract, and for a few years, he was one of the most dominant defensive centers in the NBA. But then again, the NBA started changing, teams started playing way faster, and space on the floor was much more needed, and they needed more centers that could switch onto guards that could actually shoot, and that style didn't really fit his game. Zach Randolph is a name that a lot of newer NBA fans may not recognize, but if you watched basketball in the early 2010s, you definitely remember him. Randolph was the heart and soul of the Memphis Grizzlies, the grit and grind teams. Those teams were built around defense, toughness, and just slowing down the game, I guess you could put it, and Randolph fit that style perfectly. He wasn't ever the most athletic player, but he was incredibly skilled around the basket, great elite footwork. He was one of the toughest players to guard when he actually had the ball on the inside and he wanted to drive in. During his best years in Memphis, he was averaging around 20 points and 10 rebounds per game, and he made multiple All-Star teams. But what really made Randolph special was how physical he actually played, like most of the guys in this list. Every game felt like a battle in the paint with Randolph, and the Grizzlies even made a deep run during that era, including a trip to the Western Conference Finals in 2013. Randolph finished off his career with Sacramento, and after that he stepped away from the league, and we haven't really heard much of him since. One of my favorite guys on this list is Darren Collison, who just disappeared from the league in a way people didn't really expect. He came into the NBA in 2009 and quickly built a reputation as a really solid point guard. He was quick, smart with the ball, and he can score whenever he needed to, which was most important. Collison had some of the strongest seasons in his career with the Pacers and Sacramento Kings, where he averaged 16 points and 6 assists per game. He wasn't a superstar, but he was a guy that you could put on the court and just trust to run the offense. He had the capability of running it as well, which was, again, pretty important for a rotational piece. Like I mentioned, he was never really that 3-and-D guy that you could put on the court and just know he's going to be a superstar. He was more of a role player that just really fit whatever system he went into, but that's what kind of made his situation unique, is that when he actually retired, he was still playing well. In 2019, Collison shocked a lot of people after announcing he stepped away from the NBA for personal and religious reasons, which I very much respect. Shout out to him. He was a dog in the NBA. At the time, he was still a starting level guard though, and probably could have kept playing for a couple more seasons at least. Because of that, his career suddenly just randomly ended, and now fans forget how solid he was for almost a decade. And the last guy on this list is Tyreke Evans. Tyreke Evans might have one of the most surprising careers on this list. When he first came into the NBA, he looked like a future superstar, and in his rookie season with the Sacramento Kings, Evans averaged 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. That is a stat line almost no player has ever reached as a rookie. In fact, the only other players that have ever averaged more or even close to those numbers are Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Oscar Robertson, and that is a top 3 list you want to be on with them, especially for a good stat. Because of that, Evans won Rookie of the Year that year, and it looked like Sacramento had found their next star, but after an incredible rookie year, things never really went the way Evans wanted after that. Injuries really started to slow his career down, and the Kings didn't really use him as in a particular role they wanted to, because he was coming to the point where up to year 3, he was just already injury prone, and he could never have a strong comeback. And after his injuries, he kind of bounced around between multiple franchises. He still had some really good seasons later in his career though, including somewhat of a strong comeback with Memphis where he nearly averaged 20 points a game again. But unfortunately, that didn't really last for long as his career ended early after he was suspended from the league. Because of all that, Evans went from one of the most exciting young players in basketball to someone who fans barely even remember, and if you didn't watch basketball back in that time, I don't blame you. Me personally though, I didn't get to watch a rookie Tyreke Evans or really experience much of his prime, but as a Kings fan, I definitely got to watch his return after he was traded back from us from New Orleans. That was just so magical at the time, just, remembering that Tyreke Evans at a certain point in his career was a legend in Sacramento. It might have only been for 1 or 2 seasons, but again, as a Kings fan, it was still pretty cool to see one of our former players thriving again. The NBA really slows down, and new stars do come into the league every single year, and before you know it, your favorite player or just players in general who used to dominate, they're suddenly out of the league spotlight. And sometimes when you look back at guys like these, you realize how good they actually were during their prime at that time. So if there's an NBA player you think people completely forgot about, drop their name in the comments because there are definitely a lot more names that could have been on this list.